You are watching the World 24/7 on the NDTV network. I'm Parmeshwar Bawa. Let's begin with a quick look at the headlines we're tracking currently. At least 40 Indians are dead and dozens more injured in a devastating fire in a building in Kuwait. The Prime Minister and External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar have expressed shock over the incident. Congress leader Rahul Gandhi has expressed serious concern about the condition of Indian workers in the Gulf region. G7 leaders start their annual summit looking to double down on support for Ukraine in its war with Russia and offer a united face in confronting China's political and economic ambitions. The US Reserve maintained its key interest rate and indicated that only one rate cut is anticipated before the year's end. Pakistan's new coalition government presented its first budget in Parliament. Pakistan has announced a nearly 15% hike in its defence spending and allocated 2,122 billion rupees in the 2024-25 budget, marking a significant increase from last year amid strenuous efforts to secure a fresh loan from the IMF. The Acropolis, Greece's most visited tourist site, was closed to the public during the hottest hours as the season's earliest ever heat wave swept the country, prompting school closures as well as health warnings. Well, a big focus. At least 40 Indians are dead and dozens more injured in a devastating fire in a building in the southern Mangaf district of Kuwait. This building housed Indian workers and the fire actually started in a kitchen in a 6-story building. This is what officials have informed us, adding that the building reportedly had nearly 160 people living in it who are workers of the same company. The Ministry of External Affairs has said in a statement that over 50 people suffered injuries, adding that conditions of most of them are now stable, but the injured workers were suffering from various injuries, including burns, broken bones due to falling from a high place, and carbon monoxide poisoning due to smoke inhalation. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister and External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar have expressed shock over this incident, and Congress leader Rahul Gandhi has expressed serious concern about the condition of Indians in the Gulf region.
कोई तकलीफ वगैरह भैया अभी आपको?
नहीं, तकलीफ कोई नहीं है, पहले से बेटर है।
अच्छा,
ठीक है,
अच्छा लग रहा है। अपने घर पे बात हुई आपके?
जी, बात हो गई है।
सब लोग
ठीक है, हाँ,
सबको इत्मीनान दे दिए,
हाँ,
तसल्ली दे दिए?
जी,
अच्छा। कंपनी के आदमी आए थे आपसे पूछने के लिए?
हाँ, कंपनी के आदमी आते हैं।
ओके, तो अपना ख्याल रखिए भाई, और कोई परेशानी की बात नहीं है। मिनिस्ट्री यहाँ पे बहुत ख्याल करती है, आप भी अपना ख्याल रखें, है ना? थैंक यू वेरी मच, थैंक यू वेरी मच। आप कहाँ से? नेपाल से हैं?
हाँ जी,
नेपाल से हैं। कैसा लग रहा है अभी?
थोड़ा अच्छा लग रहा है।
अच्छा लग रहा है, कोई परेशानी
नहीं, कोई परेशानी नहीं।
ओके, अपने घर में बात की आपने अपनी फैमिली से? इंडिया में, बांग्लादेश में? आप कहाँ पे? आप नेपाल के हैं? नेपाल के, ये नेपाल से हैं। ये भी कंपनी में काम करते थे। ये कितने बजे हादसा हुआ था भाई?
वो 4:30 बजे से।
4:30 बजे। फिर आपने कैसे बचे आप?
हम तो सुबह आदमी लोग जो हल्ला कर रहा था रोड पे, इसलिए हम जाएगा। बाद में हम लोग शीशे खोल के बाद में वो जंप नहीं किया।
हाँ।
वो केबल तार था, उसमें बांध के।
अच्छा, केबल तार। अच्छा, केबल तार से बाहर नीचे उतरे? ओहो,
वो 3 आदमी जैसे उतरा उसमें।
अच्छा,
4 आदमी जैसे।
अच्छा।
और दूसरा रूम का आदमी इधर आके उतरा।
Well, the Ministry of External Affairs spokesperson Randhir Jaiswal has said the Minister of State Kirti Vardhan Singh has left for Kuwait on the direction of the Prime Minister to oversee assistance to Indians injured in the fire and to ensure early repatriation of mortal remains of those who died.
See, we had a meeting last night with the Honorable Prime Minister, and that's the last update we have. about this very sad tragedy, and the rest of the situation will be cleared the moment we reach there. The victims are mostly burn victims, and some of the bodies have been charred beyond recognition. So a DNA test is underway to identify the victims, and the Air Force plane is on the ready, and as soon as the bodies are identified, their kin will be informed, and our Air Force plane will bring the bodies back. The latest figures that we had last night, the casualty figures are around 48, 49, out of which 42 or 43 are believed to be our countrymen Indians.
And at least 2 workers from Tamil Nadu are feared dead in the Kuwait fire tragedy that killed nearly 50 Indians. The Tamil Nadu government has announced a helpline and is coordinating medical help to the injured through Tamil associations. My colleague Sam Daniels spoke to the non-resident Tamil Welfare Minister, Ginji Masthan. Listen in.
The Tamil Nadu government is keeping a close watch on the developments in Kuwait following the major fire there in which 49 Indians are suspected to have been killed. And joining us now, Mr. Senji Masthan, the Minister in charge of non-resident Tamils in Tamil Nadu. So thank you very much for your time. என்ன தகவல் உங்களுக்கு தெரிய வந்திருக்கு? What's the information you're getting, sir?
சற்று நேரத்துக்கு முன்பு எங்களுக்கு 2 தமிழர்கள் அதில் உயிரிழந்து இருக்கிறார் என்ற செய்தி தகவல் சொல்லப்பட்டது. ஆனால் அவர்களுடைய விபரத்தை கேட்ட பிறகு அங்கே தீ விபத்தால் அது பாதிக்கப்பட்டு உயிரிழந்த காரணத்தினால் இன்னும் சரியான முறையில் தெளிவாக அடையாளம் காட்ட முடியவில்லை. அவர்கள் தமிழர்கள் தானா மற்ற மாநிலத்தை சேர்ந்தவர்களா என்பதை அடையாளம் காட்ட முடியவில்லை. அடையாளம் கண்ட பிறகு அதை பற்றி தகவல் சொல்வதாக சொல்லியிருக்கிறார்கள். அதற்கு மாண்புமிகு முதலமைச்சர் அவர்கள் உடனடியாக மற்றவர்களுக்கும் அது மருத்துவமனையில் இருக்கிறவர்களுக்கும் அந்த சிகிச்சை அளிப்பதற்கான உண்டான உதவிகள் செய்ய வேண்டும்.
2 பேர் இன்னும் உறுதிப்படுத்தப்படலை.
அதாவது இன்னும் தெளிவாக சொல்லலை.
The minister says that there were reports that 2 people from Tamil Nadu could have been killed, but no confirmation yet. They're waiting for official confirmation. The challenge there, he says, is since many are burnt, the bodies are burnt, it's very difficult to identify, but they have to still wait for official confirmation. ரெண்டு விதமா போறதுக்கு வாய்ப்பு இருக்கு. There could be people dead, there could be people injured. What are the arrangements Tamil Nadu government is making, sir?
இல்லை, தமிழகத்தை பொறுத்தவரையிலும் தமிழகத்தை சேர்ந்தவங்க அங்கே இருந்தாங்கன்னா அவங்கள அடையாளம் கண்ட பிறகு அந்த உடலை பொறுப்போடு அந்த யாருடைய உரிமைதாரரோ அவர்களிடத்தில் ஒப்படைக்கின்ற பணியும் அவர்களுக்கு தேவையான நிவாரணமும் கேட்டு பெற்று தர வேண்டியது தமிழக அரசினுடைய கடமையும்.
If there are any loss of lives in Kuwait, we will do everything possible to identify them and also to bring the mortal remains back home. In Chennai with Suresh, Sam Daniel, Find TV.
Well, my colleagues Sam Daniel and Mohammad Ghazali join us live as well for current updates. Let's go across to Ghazali first. Ghazali, the Ministry of External Affairs has said that the bodies are charred beyond recognition and a DNA test is underway to identify some victims.
Yeah, and that is exactly why the relief work, or say the identification process, is taking a longer time, because as you rightly mentioned, the officials from MEA have confirmed that perhaps the burn injuries are such that the bodies are beyond recognition. So to identify all those who have died is a time-taking process now, and all those who survived with minor injuries are the ones who are assisting officials to identify that the dead ones, because they were staying together in that building. The Interior Affairs Ministry of Kuwait has also promised strict action against those, including the owner of the building, the janitor who was cooking, which later led to the fire throughout the building, and also they are also investigating that how come this entire 6-story building had more than 160 people. So that certainly is a violation of the labor laws there. So whosoever was responsible for housing them crammed in that 6-story building will face the action there. MOS Mr. Kirtivardhan Singh of the External Affairs Ministry held a high-level meeting with the Prime Minister at his residence, where Prime Minister also expressed his condolences and immediately asked Mr. Kirtivardhan Singh to go to Kuwait for a smooth repatriation of the mortal remains of those who perished in this tragic incident. So Mr. Kirtivardhan Singh, the External Affairs, MOS of the External Affairs Ministry, will be arriving in Kuwait in some time, and there he will meet the injured who are in the hospital and also try to establish contact with the family members of those who have died there.
Ghazali, as always, thanks so much for joining us with the latest update. We will, of course, revert to you for regular updates. Sam, meanwhile, we're told that there are several Keralites among the victims.
That's right, Parmeshwar. Both authorities from Kerala and Tamil Nadu are working closely with the embassy and also with the companies that had employed these workers in Kuwait. And at the moment, both these government authorities are not able to confirm how many could be from each of these states. But Kerala officials say since the bodies are charred, they are working both with the workers, with the embassy and with the employers. And around 8 o'clock Kuwait time, which could be in a few hours from now, they expect the first batch of post-mortem to be completed, and they say they'll be able to at least release the official names of those identified dead, and that could be the beginning of this long identification process. The Kerala Chief Minister Pinarayi has said there could be several among those dead from Kerala, and they're also working with the embassy in terms of flying back the mortal remains once the identification is done. It was a cramped place. Many of them had to jump from that high-rise building, and in that also many suffered injuries. In terms of the injured, Kerala authorities are able to confirm that 26 of them are from Kerala, and they are being given best possible treatment. They don't know exactly what is the condition of all of them, but they are being treated. And in terms of the members from Tamil Nadu, the minister says that the Tamil associations there also are reaching out to the injured people to help them get the best treatment, if required, to move them to other hospitals. Parmeshwar.
As always, Sam, thanks so much for joining us with that crucial update. Well, let's turn our attention now to the G7 plan of action. Well, leaders of the group of 7 industrialized nations arrived in Italy ahead of their annual summit. The Biden administration, meanwhile, has announced a series of new financial sanctions aimed at interrupting the fast-growing technological links between China and Russia, and the actions were announced just as the US president was leaving the country for the summit in Italy. Well, the summit is due to kick off at 11 a.m. on Thursday with a discussion about Africa, climate change and development. The conversation then switches to the Middle East before 2 sessions that are dedicated to Ukraine, the first including Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Day 2 has sessions on immigration, the Indo-Pacific and economic security before the arrival in the afternoon of the outreach partners for talks on the Mediterranean, energy and Africa. By the way, Pope Francis will lead talks on artificial intelligence. But what exactly are the things to keep an eye on? Well, much focus will be on whether the leaders can finally reach agreement on how to leverage profits generated by Russian assets frozen in the West and use them for Ukraine. US officials also expect the G7 to send a tough warning next week to smaller Chinese banks to stop assisting Russia in evading Western sanctions. More broadly, sources in Washington say the United States is poised to announce significant new sanctions against financial institutions and non-banks that are part of the technology and goods channels that supply the Russian military. It is unclear if the rest of the G7 is ready to follow a tough US line, though. China will also be discussed at length. The leaders are likely to issue a statement expressing concern on Chinese industrial overcapacity and will also look at the possibility of imposing additional measures to level the field with heavily subsidized Chinese companies. Again, the United States feels much strongly about this than some EU nations. But the G7 leaders are likely to express their resolve in addressing the heavy debt burden faced by many emerging market and developing countries. But it is not clear what this commitment will mean in real terms, because Italy is still pushing for an accord on a global minimum tax on multinationals, even if it said last month that a deal would not be finalized by June as previously planned. So officially, the summit runs until the 15th of June, but US President Joe Biden is flying out on the night of the 14th. And the only official item for Saturday at present is the closing news conference of the host, the Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, plus a number of bilaterals for remaining leaders. Meanwhile, our Prime Minister will leave for Italy to attend the 50th G7 Leaders Summit. It will be his first trip abroad after assuming charge as the Prime Minister for the 3rd term. My colleague Vishnu Shom has touched down in Bari. Here are the latest updates from Ground Zero for you.
I come to you from Bari in the southeast of Italy. In a couple of hours from now, the Prime Minister will be travelling to about 50-60 kilometers away from where I am in the Apulia region. He's over here as a special invitee for the G7 talks. The G7 grouping is one of the most important groupings anywhere in the world. It's composed of the foremost powers. But over a period of time, the nature of the economic existence of India has changed drastically. For example, India now has a larger economy than Canada, the host Rome, and also France. And therefore, given the role of India as being a leader in the global south, India has been called time and time again to be a part of the G7. It's important this time around because it's the first time that the Prime Minister is visiting a country after being sworn in recently for his third consecutive time. What is he going to be talking about? Well, there are several key issues. The Indo-Pacific region, and that's an area that concerns India greatly. We always champion Indo-Pacific security and safety. Concerns over Africa. Climate change, that's an issue which is at the center of everybody's heart. There's the entire issue of environment, migration patterns, illegal migration, and artificial intelligence. So those are themes that the G7 is looking at this time around. But very significantly, this meeting of the G7 comes just a couple of days prior to a world summit calling for peace in Ukraine. And over here, Ukraine will be a very important topic as well. What about India and our position and our role as far as bringing peace to Ukraine, ending the crisis over there? Well, India has fantastic relations with Russia. We've got great equations with Ukraine as well. But whether the Prime Minister is called upon for his advice on how to tackle the situation over here in G7, because the G7 will also likely be talking about the Ukraine crisis, that we do not know. But it's going to be a relatively short visit. The Prime Minister flies back on the 14th. He returns to New Delhi. And in a sense, this visit of the Prime Minister, which is very important in terms of profile, has of course been entirely overshadowed by the immense tragedy where dozens of Indians have lost their lives in Kuwait. But we'll be tracking this move very, very closely. In case you were wondering why I am quite far away from where the G7 summit is being held, it's because that entire area with so many world leaders coming in has been declared as an absolute red zone. So the media access is actually 60 kilometers, think about it, from where it's all going to be taking place. That said, we will be bringing you footage of the Prime Minister as he arrives and in his important meetings. There are a couple of important meetings that we need to also think about. Will there, for example, be a meeting between the Prime Minister and his Canadian counterpart? That would be very important since it comes at a time when relations between India and Canada have been fraught. One of the issues which has been a big dividing factor in terms of those relations is the entire issue of Khalistani supporters being allowed to go about their business in Canada. In fact, in Brindisi, which is another city not too far from where I am now, there was a statue of Gandhiji which was being constructed, which was actually defaced quite recently in the last couple of days, and there were Khalistani slogans which were put on. That's been cleaned up now. But again, the international threat of Khalistan, the fact that there are sympathizers all across Europe and in Italy as well, does remain a concern for India. Vishnu Shom for NDTV.
Well, in other news, the US Federal Reserve has said it is keeping its benchmark lending rate at its current level for the 7th time in a row, while signaling fewer rate cuts than previously estimated. That means borrowing costs on everything from car loans to mortgage rates will remain elevated. Officials penciled in just one rate cut this year, according to the latest economic projections, compared to the 3-day forecast in March. But they also expect inflation to be more stubborn this year. Here are the finer details for you.
The Federal Reserve kept its key interest rate unchanged in the 5.25 to 5.5% range and indicated that just one rate cut is expected before the end of the year, essentially going back to and scaling back to their earlier projection. The S&P 500 and Nasdaq posted record highs after inflation data came in softer than expected, but closed off the day's highs after the Federal Reserve projected only one rate cut this year as opposed to three projected earlier. While policymakers stated there's been modest further progress on achieving the central bank's inflation target, they clearly signal that policy easing hinges on more progress in reducing inflation altogether. The Fed chair also stated that policymakers were content to leave rates where they are until the economy sends a clear signal that something else is needed through either a more convincing decline in price pressures or a jump in the unemployment rate.
The Acropolis, Greece's most visited tourist site, was closed to the public during the hottest hours as the season's earliest ever heat wave swept the country, prompting school closures as well as health warnings. Now, their Met Department has noted that this is the earliest heat wave, which for Greece is classed as temperatures exceeding 38 degrees Celsius for at least 3 days in recorded history. In other news, the European Commission shocked China by imposing duties of up to 38% on electric vehicle imports from the 4th of July, a level that was much higher than expected, potentially triggering a trade war at a time of great political uncertainty in Europe. The provisional duties, which come after a months-long investigation into Chinese state aid to its EV makers, drew immediate condemnation from Beijing, which has already threatened retaliation against European farmers and plane makers and launched an anti-dumping probe targeting the French spirits industry.
歪曲补贴的定义，滥用规则程序，使中欧经贸摩擦的风险不断上升，也严重影响了企业对欧合作信心。那么，欧方以产能过剩为由，实施对中国电动汽车的反补贴调查。 我们认为是典型的保护主义。
Meanwhile, almost half of all American adults approve of the conviction of former US President Donald Trump. This is what an AP NORC poll shows. Trump became the first former US president to be convicted of felony charges, as you're well aware, after he was found guilty on 34 counts of falsifying business records in connection to a hush money payment to porn star Stormy Daniels, who alleged she had an affair with Trump in 2006. As far as the numbers are concerned, well, 48% approve of the conviction, according to the poll, while 29% disapprove and 21% say they have no opinion. And finally, pilgrims have been streaming into Saudi Arabia's holy city of Mecca ahead of the start of Hajj later this week, as the annual pilgrimage returns to its monumental scale. Saudi officials say more than 1.5 million foreign pilgrims have arrived in the country by Tuesday, the vast majority by air from across the world. As always, news and updates continue on the World 24/7. We'll be tracking the latest developments for you. Do stay tuned.